Hello, welcome back. This is our Web API video. So the Web API refers to the GridDB tool by the same name, which allows you to communicate with your GridDB server via the HTTP protocol. So that means we can send HTTP GET requests or POST requests to either query our data or manipulate our data. So we can do the whole suite of CRUD commands, which is create, read, update, delete, directly from the web. So you can use, I could use my phone, you could use whatever you want, as long as you have permissions and everything is set in place. You could even use like third-party apps like Grafana, stuff like that we'll get into in another lecture. But so for now, let's actually run through and install the Web API, and then just use a few commands to let you see how it's used, and then maybe we'll get into more advanced stuff later. All right, so first up, let's grab the package. So it's going to be on GitHub. So you just search GridDB Web API. It's of the same name. So we can just clone this repo. The releases is just the source code, so it's going to be the same idea. So let's git clone this. And while that's going, we can look at the instructions. So we can see we got to build it, but it's a two commander. Basically, it's a one command. So you need to navigate to this directory, and then you just run the Gradle build. So let's go into the cloned repo first, and then we go into this Web API directory, and then we run the Gradle build. And then it'll build really fast, maybe like 10 seconds or so, or 3 seconds or so. And then we verify that this file has been created. So I believe, yeah, it's there. So good to go. And then we need to set our GS Web API home variable. So it's basically where we're at, but one above that. So I guess the root directory of this project. So we'll just copy and paste. It's kind of strange looking, but I guess they want to keep us in here. So next up is we need to edit the parameter file. So parameter files refer to these two files in the conf directory. So I guess we need to go back up. There's the conf, and then there's two files we need to edit. So the repository one is the one we need to edit first. So this one houses our cluster information, so we can set my cluster. So this is our cluster name. This is the default that comes with running GridDB as a service. The mode is actually different now. So the mode is actually fixed list. And then address and port, this is for multicast. We don't use multicast, so we can delete these. JDBC address and port, we also don't use these. But transaction member we do use. This is a fixed list thing. So we're using the same local server. So it's a local server, which is the home server, the current IP, the local IP, and then we do the port, which is this. And then same thing with the SQL member. It's the same. And then you do 2001. Okay. And then we can check out the GridDB Web API. Whoops. There's nothing in here we need to change right now because we're just doing a quick demo. But you do notice support here is 8080. Okay. So now if you look here, it just tells us to run, and we're good to go. So let's try that. So Java jar web build libs and whatever this. Okay. All right, it looks like it's running now. Yep, started application, no errors, good to go, and it says here we're listening on port 8080. Cool. So now let's just look at what the docs say, then we can kind of build out our queries or whatever instructions we want to run from here. So first up, the first example is to create a container. So the docs are using curl. So you could use curl. So curl is basically running on the like running in your terminal. So if I open up a new shell here, I could theoretically curl my running GridDB server and it'll work. So you can run it from anywhere, but we're not going to do that because it's not good video wise, and it's kind of ugly. And I think this kind of scares people with how this looks. It just looks like a bunch of gibberish. So let's just take the data that's presented here and try to build our request using Postman. So Postman is an API kind of helper tool So it really helps if you're building APIs, if you're a web developer. You can test them using this. It's much easier and more visual than trying to use curl and having small errors crop up from who knows what, okay? Anyway, so first, the default is get. Most of the time, if you're running HTTP requests, you're using a get, but there's other options here, of course. So let's see if this, so here it says we're running a post actually. So since we want to create data, we have to post. Our HTTP request has to be a post, so we're going to send data over and expect it to stick. So let's change this to post. And then let's paste this. And here it says host. So the host is, normally you would think it's a local host like this one. But since I'm using a virtual machine, it's actually not on the same network, like not the same machine as the one I'm using to record. So I actually have to use the local IP address. Which I know already because I SSH'd into there. It's a 209. And then the port, as we showed earlier, was 8080. And then the cluster name, as we changed earlier, we changed it ourselves in the doc, but the default is my cluster. If you don't set this correctly, it'll fail. Okay, so that's the end of our URL. So next we have to look at what else this request needs to fire off correctly, right? So let's see here. Basic. So this is basic authentication. So let's go over here. We look at the authorization section. We change the type to basic auth. Username is admin. Password is also admin. So these are the default options. Header. We have to set the header type to application JSON. The type has to be application JSON. You would think it'd be in here, but actually it's not. This is all being produced by Postman. So as you can see here, the admin username password that we set is actually here. It's encoded. So now we want to we want to actually send some data over to our GridDB server, right? So our server is expecting some kind of HTTP request. Right now we want to create a container. So if we look at this command that the docs was giving us, it looks like it's creating a container of collection type and it has some kind of extra data. So let's try to copy and paste this into our Postman. If you notice, I'm omitting these quotations at the beginning and end. This stuff is not needed for the actual command, the actual request. This stuff is mainly for the curl command itself to differentiate this between the rest of the commands, but obviously not important. So first, let's change the body type to JSON. As we saw here, it's necessity. If you don't change this, it won't work, right? We paste this. It's still kind of ugly. Luckily, Postman likes to beautify things for us instead of having ugly command line stuff, so we could beautify. And now it doesn't look as scary, right? Now you can see it's simply a JSON file. So we just set the schema to our container. So container name, let's try video course test. Container type, collection, sure. Row key, sure. Columns, so this is where we set our schema. So we want 3 columns, column 1, column 2, and column 3. And then just for kicks, we'll do different ones for each. String, integer, bool. Then we also have an index here. Okay. Anything else we're missing? Curl, post, basic authentication, header, data is this. Okay, I think this is the response. Okay, so that should be good to go. Let's send it. So you can see here, no message available path. So I was having issues with this. I was wondering what was going on. If you have issues like this, you can go back to your currently running web shell, and you will try to see if there's any indication of what happened. This didn't even see the request, but I realized that, yeah, the %20 means this is URL encoded, it's a space. So when I copy and pasted the address from the docs, you notice there's a space here. So that's my bad. So now let's try again, okay? Okay, now we got our 201 created. So there's no response, text response from the web API, but the 201 is good. Anything in the 200s is good. That's a A-OK, everything's green, you see. And it says request has been fulfilled and new resource being created. So perfect. So what we can do is we can go back to our shell And we can see here, completed initialization, create container, cluster my cluster. Cool. So now, theoretically, this container name should exist within our database. So I have the shell here open. So I can do show container. I can paste that in there. And there you go. You can see it has an index of type tree, and it has 3 columns. Very cool, very easy, right? Next up, I have some saved here already because I didn't want to go through everything every time. So in this one, oh, I already had this saved. I guess I just want to run through it, so I don't need this actually. So let's actually not look at that. Let's check down here. So we can append data too. So this would be update, I suppose. Basically, let's try to run this actually. So let's run this so that we can push data to our newly created container. Then we can update that same container, and that'll be an update, I guess. So let's copy this and let's build out a new query again. And this one is also, oh, so now this one is a put, not a post. So you should always be mindful of these things. So let's change this to put. So I guess we're not creating something, we're pushing something to something that already exists. Okay, so sorry, I have to run through this again. So let's do 192.168.1.209. Port is 8080. Cluster name is my cluster with a capital C. DBs, public is good. Container name. Okay, container name is the one we need to add. So this one is video course test, I think. That's what I did earlier, right? Video course test, yes. Okay, rows, okay. Authorization, I'll have to do the same thing. Basic auth, make sure everything's good. Body. Okay, now we got to go to the body, and I'm assuming it's going to be a JSON type again. Yeah. So basically, you just do this. You just put in the values. You don't put any column information. You just, our container has 3 types, right? We made one that was a string, integer, and Boolean. So we can do that. So the row key is the first one, the name, column 1. So let's try this. Let's paste this in here. This is not liking our data. Oh, it's because we don't need the quotation marks, like I said earlier, right? I was the one spouting that earlier. Okay, let's send this. Okay, good. It says status okay, and then you can read that if you want. But yeah, now there's one row within this container. I'm sorry, I'm switching a bunch here. So now let's try to SQL select from video course test. And we have this, okay? Now let's push another one. Let's try test. And let's give it an ID of 2, and true is fine. So we pushed 1, so that's what it's telling us. We pushed one data in there. So now if we query this again, now we have 2. But now since we're doing CRUD, so we already created, we haven't read yet, but we have updated. Oh no, we haven't updated yet, so let's update. So the way you would update a row in GridDB is basically you send a data that has the exact same row key as the one you want to update, and then it'll update that. So let's go back to value, and now let's change it to false, and let's change the integer to 27. Okay, send this. It says 1, good. We go back, we query again, and we still only have 2 rows. So instead of pushing a new row, we just updated the previous row. So now value changed from 1 and true to 27 and false. Okay. Now let's try to read from our database. So here I have one already prepared, I believe. So here we're trying to actually run a SQL command. So you can actually just run straight up SQL from the browser and do that. So if you were building an application using GridDB, it'd actually be really easy to gather your data from there, because yeah, you can straight up run SQL through the web. So I already have the URL in place here, my cluster. Everything's basically the same as the other ones, except for the end you have to say you're running a SQL command, and then you run what the type of SQL you want to run, and then you run it. So let's run it from our newly created container. Send this. Oh, sorry, I was confused. I was kind of speechless there. So it shows you when you do this, it shows you the columns, and then it shows you the results. So let's get crazy actually. So let's try to query that that big data set we have. So we have that device 1, device 2, device 3, the IoT data. It's 100,000 rows. I'm not entirely sure how Postman will process that much data, but if it breaks, right? Let's try it out. Device 2. So this should work because it's in the same cluster, it's in the same database, and yeah, the user has access. There's really no reason this shouldn't work. So let's run this and see what happens. So we can see here it's, oh yeah, there you go. So it took 3 seconds, which, you know, if you're doing it in the shell, it takes 10 milliseconds. But, you know, we're communicating through the web and through HTTP and stuff. But yeah, it gathered 14 megabytes of data. So it probably don't let us scroll through because it's kind of broken. But yeah, we gathered all of that data and it's here in our Postman. So it's running very sluggishly because it's a lot of data, as you can see. But it works, so that's pretty cool. All right, so the last thing here is to delete. So I'm looking here at the docs. I don't really see a delete option. But I'm going to check the web API specification. This usually has more information. And sure enough, here in section F, there is a delete. So let's just control F, F section to delete rows. And yeah, apparently it's really easy. So apparently you just send over the row keys in the body inside an array or brackets. And it should just delete all of those rows. Okay, seems easy. All right, so let's grab again the URL. So this should be simple enough. And then one other, I'm doing the wrong thing. It's this one. Yeah, because I was like, you need to specify the container. And then we also notice that the method is a new one. It's delete this time. So let's go to Postman. Let's just create a new one. Actually, no, let's not do that because then I have to do a bunch of stuff. So let's just repurpose this one. So let's change post to delete. Let's just make sure that the URL is what we expect, which it looks like it is. The main thing is that it adds a container name and rows, which we have here. We go to the body. Let's delete this. Let's see what it says again. So let's control F again. Basically, all you need to do is send row keys within brackets. Okay, so let's try the second one. Let's try test. Let's make sure authorization is good, everything's good. Okay, let's send this. Okay, seems to have worked. Let's go back here. Let's select from video course test. Okay, so test is gone, but value is still there. Perfect. Now let's try to delete value. And now it should be 0 items in here. Cool. Let's see what happens if we delete some and it doesn't exist. So value doesn't exist anymore, right? So let's try this. It still gives us a 204. So I guess technically GridDB doesn't really need to know that nothing is there. It just sends, hey, there's no error, which is true, and doesn't change anything. So video course test still has 0 rows. So yeah, deleting rows is extremely simple and yeah, extremely effective. All right, that does it for this video. Thank you for watching.